Captain Vex Thornwall had seen plenty of stupid humans in his 47 rotations as a space merchant, but Marcus Kane took the prize for absolute, mind-numbing idiocy. The human sat across from him in the cargo bay of the freighter Stellar Drift, scratching his stubbled chin like he was contemplating the mysteries of the universe instead of the most basic trade negotiation in existence. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular brand of human confidence that usually preceded spectacular disasters. "You want me to haul 3 tons of refined Ziridium across the Nexus belt, dodge pirates, deal with customs officials who'd sell their own mothers for a decent bribe, and deliver it to a war zone. And in return you're offering me what exactly?" Vex's 4 eyes rolled in perfect synchronization. Humans. Always so dramatic. The standard rate, Kane, 12,000 Galactic credits, plus fuel allowances and hazard pay. 12,000? Marcus laughed, a sound that made Vex's head tentacles twitch with irritation. "Captain, I wouldn't haul garbage to the nearest recycling station for 12,000 credits. That Ziridium is worth at least 50 times that amount." "Then why don't you buy it yourself and make the delivery?" Vex shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because I'm not stupid enough to risk my ship in the Nexus belt. But I'm also not desperate enough to work for peanuts." The negotiation had been going in circles for 2 hours. Vex needed that Ziridium delivered to the mining colony on Kepler 7, and Marcus Kane was the only human captain crazy enough to attempt the run. The problem was, Marcus knew it. "Fine," Vex hissed through his breathing slits. "What do you want?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, that infuriating human smile spreading across his face. "I want something interesting. Credits are just numbers in a computer. I want something with value." Vex's head tentacles writhed in frustration. Humans and their obsession with interesting things. Give them a choice between a fortune in credits and a shiny rock with a good story, and half of them would take the rock every time. "I don't have time for this, Kane. Name your price." "Show me what you've got in your private cargo hold." Every merchant had a private cargo hold. It was an unwritten rule of space trade, a place where you kept the things that weren't exactly legal, weren't exactly ethical, or weren't exactly any of the authorities' business. Vex's private hold contained the usual assortment of questionable acquisitions, rare artifacts, exotic weapons, biological samples that probably violated several dozen treaties, and... "No," Vex said flatly, "absolutely not." "Come on, Captain, you're asking me to risk my ship and my crew. The least you can do is show me what you're hoarding down there." Marcus had that look in his eyes, the same look Vex had seen in the eyes of treasure hunters and tomb raiders throughout the galaxy. Humans were incurably curious, and curiosity was a weakness that could be exploited. With a resigned sigh that sounded like air escaping from a punctured hull, Vex led Marcus down to the private cargo hold. The security scanner recognized his biosignature, and the heavy door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The hold was filled with the usual collection of dubious merchandise, but Marcus's attention was immediately drawn to the containment cell in the far corner. Inside the translucent barrier sat a figure that would have been humanoid if not for the distinctive blue-tinted skin, silver hair, and the elaborate tattoos that covered her arms and shoulders. "Is that a Veil Tharan?" Marcus asked, his voice suddenly serious. "Yes," Vex replied, hoping his reluctance was obvious. "And she's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Captain. You taught me that." The Veil Tharan looked up as they approached, her violet eyes sharp with intelligence and barely contained fury. She was young by her species standards, probably no more than 200 rotations old, and she carried herself with the kind of dignity that suggested she hadn't always been locked in a cargo hold. "What's her story?" Marcus asked. Vex's tentacles twitched nervously. She was payment for a debt. A syndicate boss on Titan Station couldn't cover what he owed me, so he offered her instead. As a slave, Vex admitted, the words tasting sour in his mouth, completely legal under syndicate law. "She's been processed through all the proper channels, has all the documentation." Marcus studied the Veil Tharan for a long moment. She stared back at him with those unsettling violet eyes, and Vex could practically see the wheels turning in the human's head. This was going to be expensive. "I'll take her," Marcus said finally. "Kane, you don't understand. She's worth at least 50,000 credits on the open market. The Veil Tharans are a proud species, and their nobility pays handsomely to free their own people from bondage." "Then why haven't you sold her already?" Vex's silence was answer enough. The truth was, he'd been too busy with other deals to arrange a proper sale, and keeping a Veil Tharan slave was more trouble than it was worth. They were notoriously difficult to control, prone to escape attempts, and had a disturbing tendency to hold grudges that lasted for centuries. "Look," Marcus said, "you need that Zeridium delivered, and I need something more interesting than credits." "She's interesting. We have a deal." "This is insane. You're trading a dangerous cargo run worth at least 30,000 credits for a slave who's probably planning to murder you in your sleep." "Maybe. But at least I won't be bored." The paperwork took another hour. Vex had to transfer all the legal documentation, slave registration certificates, medical records and behavioral assessments. The Veil Tharan, whose name according to the documents was Lyra Nightsong, watched the entire process with an expression that could have melted steel. "She's your problem now," Vex said as Marcus prepared to transfer her to his ship. "Don't say I didn't warn you." "Captain Thornwall," Lyra spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a musical quality that was characteristic of her species. "You are making a mistake." "I'm making a profit," Vex replied. "Kane's the one making the mistake." Marcus activated the slave collar's transfer protocol, and Lyra's restraints shifted from Vex's control to his. She stood gracefully, moving with the fluid motions of a trained dancer or a deadly assassin. With Veil Tharans, it was often hard to tell the difference. "Come on," Marcus said to her. "Let's get you settled on my ship." As they walked through the docking tube connecting the two vessels, Lyra remained silent. Marcus's ship, the Phoenix's Edge, was smaller than Vex's freighter, but clearly well maintained. The corridors were clean, the air recycling system hummed efficiently, and everything had the look of a vessel that was loved rather than just used. "This is your quarters," Marcus said, opening the door to a small but comfortable cabin. "I've disabled the locking mechanism from the outside. You're not a prisoner here." Lyra looked at him with those unsettling violet eyes. "Then what am I?" "I'm still figuring that out," Marcus admitted. "But you're not a slave, not on my ship. The legal documentation says otherwise." "Legal documentation can be changed, or ignored, or used as fire starter. I've never been much for paperwork anyway." For the first time since he'd seen her, something that might have been surprise flickered across Lyra's features. "You would free me?" "Eventually. First, I need to complete this cargo run. After that, we can discuss your options. And if I choose to kill you before then?" Marcus laughed, that same confident sound that had irritated Vex so much. "Then you'd be stuck on a ship you don't know how to fly in the middle of space, with no way to contact anyone who might help you. That would be pretty stupid, even for someone who's probably planning to murder me in my sleep." "I do not plan to murder you in your sleep," Lyra said with the faintest hint of what might have been amusement. "If I decide to kill you, I will do it while you are awake. It is more honorable that way. I appreciate the honesty, also the consideration for my sleep schedule." 2 days into the journey toward the Nexus Belt, Marcus was beginning to understand why Vex had been so eager to get rid of Lyra. She was smart, observant, and had an uncanny ability to appear behind him without making a sound. More than once he'd turned around to find her standing there, watching him work with those violet eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You're not what I expected," she said during one of these encounters, as Marcus was running diagnostics on the navigation system. "What did you expect?" A typical human slave owner. Crude, violent, obsessed with power and dominance. "Sorry to disappoint you. I'm just obsessed with not dying in a fiery explosion when we hit the Nexus Belt." The Nexus Belt was a region of space that existed in the grey area between several different territorial claims. It was lawless, dangerous, and filled with pirates, smugglers, and other individuals who had compelling reasons to avoid civilized space. It was also the fastest route to Kepler-7, which was why Marcus had agreed to make the run in the first place. "Tell me about your species," Marcus said as he fine-tuned the sensor array. "I've never dealt with Veiltharans before." "We are an old people," Lyra replied, settling into the co-pilot's chair without invitation. "We value honor, tradition, and the bonds of family above all else." "Sounds nice. Very civilized. We are also warriors when the situation demands it. My people do not take kindly to being enslaved." "Good thing you're not enslaved anymore." "The documentation says otherwise." "The documentation is wrong. You're free to go whenever you want." "Of course, whenever you want might have to wait until we're somewhere other than the vacuum of space, but the principle stands." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, studying him with that unnerving intensity. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why what?" "Why free me? You could sell me for a fortune." "Veiltharan nobles pay enormous ransoms for family members." Marcus looked up from the sensor array. "Are you nobility?" The question seemed to surprise her. Would it matter? Probably not. "I've never been impressed by titles." "Then why?" Marcus set down his tools and turned to face her directly. "Because slavery is wrong. Because you don't deserve to be someone's property. Because I've seen what the slave trade does to people, and I don't want any part of it." "That is unexpected." "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises." The proximity alarms started screaming 3 hours later, jolting both of them out of their respective thoughts. Marcus rushed to the pilot station while Lyra followed close behind, her movements still eerily silent. "What is it?" she asked. "A company," Marcus replied grimly, studying the sensor readouts. 3 ships, coming up fast from behind. Configuration suggests pirates. The communication system crackled to life, filled with static and the unmistakable sound of someone trying very hard to sound intimidating. "Attention, Freighter Phoenix's Edge, this is Captain Razak of the Blood Tide. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force and creative violence." Marcus keyed the comm system. "Captain Razak, this is Marcus Kane. I'm carrying medical supplies to a colony world. I don't have anything worth your time." "Every ship has something worth our time, Kane. Cut your engines now, or we'll cut them for you." "Well," Marcus said to Lyra, "this is about to get interesting." "Define interesting." "The kind of interesting where people shoot at us and we try not to die." Lyra's expression shifted, and for the first time since he'd met her, Marcus saw something that looked like anticipation in her eyes. "I have experience with such situations." "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need all the help we can get." The first pirate ship opened fire, and the Phoenix's Edge shuddered as the energy bolts struck the shields. Marcus threw the ship into a sharp turn, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to put some distance between them and their pursuers. "They're faster than us," he said through gritted teeth, "and better armed." "Then we cannot outrun them," Lyra observed calmly. "We must fight." "This is a cargo ship, not a warship. We've got defensive shields and exactly 2 pulse cannons. They've got 3 ships and enough firepower to turn us into space dust. Then we must be clever." Marcus was about to ask what she meant when Lyra moved to the co-pilot station and began working the controls with the kind of fluid precision that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "What are you doing?" "Balancing shield harmonics and routing power from non-essential systems to the weapon arrays," she replied without looking up. "Your ship is more capable than you realize." Another barrage of enemy fire struck the shields, but this time the impact was less severe. Whatever Lyra had done was working. "Where did you learn to do that?" "I am Veiltharan nobility," she said simply. "We are trained in the arts of war from childhood." Marcus stared at her for a moment before the implications hit him. You're not just nobility, you're military nobility. I am Princess Lyra Nightsong, heir to the Vale Tharan Stellar Dominion and commander of the 3rd Battle Fleet. The bottom dropped out of Marcus's stomach. He'd just traded a cargo run for a princess. Not just any princess, but the heir to one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Oh, he said weakly. That's not good. On the contrary, Lyra replied, her fingers dancing over the controls as she rerouted more power to the weapons systems. It is very good indeed. Now, shall we show these pirates what happens when they threaten the wrong ship? The first pirate vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its hull torn apart by a precisely targeted pulse cannon burst that had somehow been amplified far beyond the weapon's normal output. How did you? Harmonic resonance, Lyra explained. If you know the frequency of an enemy's hull composition, you can modulate your weapons to create destructive interference patterns. The second pirate ship, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, began to retreat. The third ship tried to follow suit, but Lyra's enhanced targeting system had already locked on. This is for enslaving me, she said quietly, and pressed the firing stud. The second explosion was even more spectacular than the first. As the third pirate ship disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus sat back in his chair and tried to process what had just happened. He'd traded a cargo run for a slave, only to discover that the slave was actually a princess with enough military knowledge to turn his modest cargo ship into a pocket battleship. So, he said finally, you're really a princess. Yes. And you're really the heir to a stellar dominion. Yes. And you really command a battle fleet. The 3rd Battle Fleet, yes, though I suspect my absence has been noticed by now. Marcus looked at her, this small woman with violet eyes and silver hair who had just destroyed 2 pirate ships without breaking a sweat. Your people are going to be looking for you. They are, and when they find me, they will want explanations. What kind of explanations? Lyra smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it was a genuine expression of amusement rather than barely controlled fury. The kind that involve asking how their princess ended up as a slave in a cargo hold, and what they should do to the people responsible. Marcus thought about Captain Vex sitting in his freighter somewhere behind them, probably congratulating himself on making such a profitable trade. They're going to be very unhappy with Captain Thornwall, aren't they? Oh yes, Lyra said. Very unhappy indeed. Marcus had encountered many uncomfortable situations during his years as a cargo hauler, but sitting across from an alien princess who could probably kill him with her breakfast spoon ranked somewhere near the top of the list. The fact that she seemed to be enjoying his discomfort didn't help matters. So, Princess, he said, trying to sound casual while internally calculating how many ways this could go horribly wrong, what exactly were you doing in Captain Thornwall's cargo hold in the first place? Lyra's expression darkened, and Marcus immediately regretted asking. I was betrayed, she said simply, by someone I trusted. That's vague. My cousin, Prince Kale Starweaver, invited me to negotiations with the Titan Station Syndicate. He said it was a diplomatic mission to establish new trade routes. Her violet eyes hardened. It was a trap. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Syndicate politics were notoriously brutal, but betraying royalty was usually the kind of mistake that resulted in entire star systems being turned into radioactive wastelands. Your cousin sold you to pay off gambling debts, Marcus guessed. Close. He sold me to eliminate a political rival. With me gone, he becomes next in line for the throne. And let me guess, your people don't know you're missing yet because you were supposed to be on a secret diplomatic mission. Exactly. Though that situation is about to change dramatically. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the long-range communication array lit up with an incoming transmission. The sender's identification made his blood run cold. HSV Nightfall, flagship of the Vale Tharan 3rd Battle Fleet. That would be Admiral Corex, Lyra said calmly. My second in command. He's probably wondering why I missed our scheduled check-in 3 days ago. 3 days ago? How long were you in that cargo hold? Nearly 2 weeks. Long enough for Admiral Corex to exhaust diplomatic channels and resort to more direct methods of locating me. The communication console chimed insistently. Marcus looked at Lyra, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead," she said. "Answer it, but perhaps you should let me do the talking." Marcus accepted the transmission, and the main screen filled with the image of a stern-looking Vaeltharan male whose military bearing was unmistakable. His silver hair was shorter than Lyra's, and his violet eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that made seasoned warriors nervous. "This is Admiral Corex of the Vaeltharan Third Battle Fleet," the figure said in accented but fluent standard. "We are tracking the signature of Princess Lyra Nightsong's personal communicator to your vessel." "Explain." "Hello, Corex," Lyra said, moving into view of the camera. "Before you do anything rash, let me explain what happened." The Admiral's expression shifted from stern authority to visible relief, followed immediately by barely contained fury. "Your Highness, are you injured? Are you being held against your will?" "I am unharmed, and I am not being held against my will. At least, not anymore." Marcus watched the Admiral's face cycle through several expressions before settling on one that promised unpleasant things for someone's immediate future. "Princess, our intelligence networks have been tracking your movements since you failed to report in. We know you were sold to a Vaeltharan slave trader, then transferred to a Cathari merchant named Vex Thornwall, and finally traded to the human currently standing next to you. We have been preparing to glass every station and ship involved in this chain of transactions." "That seems excessive," Marcus said weakly. "You are?" Admiral Corex asked, his tone suggesting that Marcus's answer would determine whether he lived to see another sunrise. Marcus Kane, captain of the Phoenix's Edge. I recently freed Princess Nightsong from slavery." "You freed her?" "Well, technically I bought her first, but then I freed her. It's complicated." Admiral Corex looked like he was trying to solve a particularly complex mathematical equation. "You purchased our princess from a slave trader and then freed her?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because slavery is wrong." The Admiral stared at him for a long moment. "You are either the most honorable human I have ever encountered, or the most foolish." "Probably both," Marcus admitted. "Admiral," Lyra interjected, "Captain Kane treated me with respect and kindness when he had no obligation to do so. He also saved my life when we were attacked by pirates." "Pirates attacked you?" "3 ships. Captain Kane and I destroyed 2 of them and drove off the 3rd. Admiral Corex's eyebrows rose. "You engaged in combat?" "The situation required it. Captain Kane's vessel is more capable than it appears, especially with proper tactical modifications." Marcus watched the Admiral's expression shift as he processed this information. Apparently, Vaeltharan princesses engaging in ship-to-ship combat wasn't entirely unexpected. "Your Highness, we need to discuss your extraction." "I have 12 ships standing by to." "Negative," Lyra said firmly. "I have obligations to complete first." "Obligations?" "Captain Kane agreed to transport me in exchange for completing a cargo delivery to Kepler 7. I intend to honor that agreement." Marcus stared at her. "You don't have to do that. You're free to go." "Honor is not negotiable, Captain Kane. Besides, I am curious to see how this situation resolves itself." Admiral Corex looked like he wanted to argue, but apparently thought better of it. "Very well, Your Highness. However, I am assigning an escort detail to ensure your safety." "1 ship only," Lyra said. "More would attract unwanted attention." "Agreed. The HSV Starforge will shadow your vessel at a discreet distance." After the transmission ended, Marcus slumped in his chair. "So now I have a Vaeltharan battle cruiser following me. This day just keeps getting better." "The Starforge is a light cruiser, not a battle cruiser," Lyra corrected. "Though I understand your concern." Do you mind if I ask why you're staying? You could be back with your fleet in a few hours. Lyra was quiet for a moment, studying the star field through the main viewport. Because you showed me kindness when you had every reason not to. Because you freed me when it would have been more profitable to sell me. Because in all my years of dealing with other species, I have rarely encountered such simple decency. It wasn't that simple. It was to you. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. That is uncommon in my experience. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I'm not some kind of saint. I've done plenty of things I'm not proud of, perhaps. But when it mattered, you chose to do the right thing. That is more than most people can claim. The next day brought them to the edge of the Kepler system, where Marcus's good mood evaporated faster than water in a vacuum. 3 ships were waiting for them at the designated coordinates, but they weren't the mining colony's transport vessels he'd been expecting. Those are syndicate ships, Lyra observed, studying the sensor readings. Yeah, which means someone leaked information about this delivery. The lead ship opened communications, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. Prince Kael Starweaver looked every inch the Veiltharan nobility, with perfectly groomed silver hair, expensive clothing, and the kind of smug expression that made Marcus want to punch something. "Cousin," Kael said, his voice dripping with false concern. "How wonderful to see you alive and well. Though I must say, your choice of companions has become rather common." "Hello, Kael," Lyra replied, her voice carefully neutral. "I was wondering when you would show yourself. I've come to collect you, of course. Your little adventure has gone on long enough." "My adventure? Did you really think I didn't know about your escape? I've been tracking you since you left Titan Station. Though I admit I'm impressed you managed to talk your way onto this human's ship." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "You set this up? The whole thing?" "Of course I did. Did you think my dear cousin's enslavement was some random misfortune? I needed her gone, but I also needed her death to look accidental. A slave who dies in transit is a tragedy. A princess who dies in a pirate attack while trying to escape is a heroic sacrifice." "You're planning to kill her," Marcus said. "I'm planning to tie up loose ends. Lyra's death will be quick and painless, I promise. Yours, less so." Lyra moved to the weapons console. "Kael, you always were too clever for your own good. And you were always too honorable. It's a weakness that will finally serve a useful purpose." The syndicate ships began moving into attack formation, but before they could complete their maneuver, space around them erupted in weapons fire. The HSV Starforge had dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the enemy vessels, its military-grade weapons tearing through their shields like paper. "This is Captain Thorne of the Veiltharan Navy," a crisp voice announced over the communication channels. "By order of Admiral Corex, you are commanded to surrender immediately or be destroyed." 2 of the syndicate ships exploded in quick succession. The third, carrying Prince Kael, tried to run but found its escape route blocked by 2 more Veiltharan vessels that had materialized out of nowhere. "It seems your plan had a flaw," Lyra said to her cousin's image on the screen. "This isn't over," Kael snarled. "The Royal Council will." "The Royal Council will be very interested to hear about your involvement in my kidnapping and attempted murder," Lyra interrupted. "Admiral Corex has been recording this entire conversation." Kael's face went pale. In Veiltharan society, crimes against royalty were punishable by exile to the dead worlds beyond the galactic rim. It was a fate generally considered worse than death. "You can't prove anything," he said desperately. "Actually, I can. Captain Kane, would you be willing to testify before the Royal Council about the circumstances of my enslavement?" Marcus looked at her, then at the screen showing her increasingly panicked cousin. "Absolutely." Prince Kael's ship was tracted by the Starforge, and within an hour the entire syndicate operation had been dismantled. Marcus watched the Veiltharan ships work with professional efficiency and found himself grateful that he'd chosen to free Lyra rather than exploit her situation. "So what happens now?" he asked as they prepared to make the final approach to Kepler-7. "Now we complete your cargo delivery," Lyra said. "After that I return to my fleet and you return to your life. And your cousin will spend the rest of his very long life contemplating his mistakes on a very cold, very empty world." The mining colony on Kepler-7 was a rough frontier settlement, the kind of place where asking too many questions was considered poor etiquette. The colonial administrator who accepted delivery of the Ziridium didn't bat an eye at Marcus's exotic passenger, though he did seem nervous about the Veiltharan warships holding position just outside the system. "Your payment, Captain Kane," the administrator said, transferring 50,000 credits to Marcus's account. "Pleasure doing business with you." Marcus stared at the amount. "That's 4 times what we agreed on. Hazard pay. Word is you ran into pirates on the way here." As they walked back to the Phoenix's edge, Lyra seemed amused by Marcus's confusion. "You are surprised by the bonus payment?" "A little. Most clients try to pay as little as possible. Most clients are not trying to curry favor with a Veiltharan princess. You told them who you were?" "I may have mentioned it during the docking procedures." Marcus laughed despite himself. "You know, a few days ago I thought I was making the worst trade deal in Galactic history. Now I'm not so sure." "Oh, it was definitely the worst trade deal in Galactic history," Lyra said with a smile. "For Captain Thornwall." As if summoned by her words, Marcus's communication console chimed with an incoming message. The sender was Vex Thornwall, and judging by the timestamp, he'd been trying to reach them for hours. "Should we answer it?" Marcus asked. "By all means. I am curious to hear what he has to say." Captain Thornwall's image appeared on the screen, and Marcus was surprised to see that the normally composed merchant looked absolutely terrified. His head tentacles were writhing in obvious distress, and his 4 eyes kept darting nervously to something off-screen. "Kane." Vex said desperately. "Thank the void you answered. You have to help me. They're going to kill me." "Who's going to kill you?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The Veiltharans. There are 12 warships surrounding my vessel. They say I'm guilty of enslaving royalty and that I'm going to be executed for crimes against the crown." "That does sound like a problem," Marcus said sympathetically. "You have to tell them it was a mistake." "I didn't know she was a princess. The documentation said she was just a common slave." "Actually, Vex, I have someone here who might want to speak with you." Lyra moved into view of the camera, and Vex's terrified expression somehow managed to become even more frightened. "Princess Nightsong," he stammered. I can explain." "Please do," Lyra said calmly. "I am very interested to hear your explanation for purchasing me from slavers and keeping me in a cargo hold for 2 weeks. It was business, just business. I had no idea who you were, and that makes it acceptable." I mean Vex's tentacles writhed frantically. "What do you want?" "I'll give you anything." "I want you to remember this conversation every time you consider participating in the slave trade," Lyra said. "I want you to think about the fact that every person you buy and sell has a story, has a family, has people who care about them." Yes, of course. I'll never deal in slaves again, I swear." "See that you don't. Admiral Corex has agreed to commute your sentence to exile and forfeiture of assets, provided you never engage in slave trading again." "Exile?" Vex's voice cracked. "For how long?" 20 years should be sufficient for you to contemplate your life choices." After the transmission ended, Marcus looked at Lyra with new respect. "You could have had him executed." "Yes, but death would have been quick. In 20 years of exile, we'll give him time to truly understand what he did wrong." "That's surprisingly merciful." "My people believe in justice, not vengeance. Besides, I suspect Captain Thornwall will find exile more educational than execution." A few hours later, Marcus found himself standing in the docking bay of the HSV Starforge, watching as Lyra prepared to transfer back to her own fleet. She'd changed out of the simple clothing she'd worn aboard his ship and into a formal Veiltharan military uniform that made her look every inch the princess she was. "So this is goodbye," Marcus said. "For now," Lyra replied. "Though I suspect our paths may cross again." "I hope so. It's been interesting." "Yes, it has." She paused, then reached into her uniform and pulled out a small crystal pendant. "This is a royal communication crystal. If you ever need assistance, or if you simply wish to talk, activate it and my fleet will respond." Marcus took the crystal, surprised by its weight. "I can't accept this. It must be worth a fortune." "Its value is not monetary. It represents trust and friendship and the bonds that form between people who have shared danger together." "I don't know what to say. Say that if I ever need a ship and a captain I can trust, you will be available." "Always," Marcus said without hesitation. Lyra smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a princess and more like the person he'd gotten to know during their journey together. "Until we meet again, Marcus Kane. Until we meet again, Princess Nightsong." As Marcus watched the Veiltharan fleet jump to hyperspace, he found himself thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a simple cargo hauler looking for an interesting trade. Now he had 50,000 credits, a royal communication crystal, and the friendship of one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. Not bad for the worst trade deal in galactic history. But as he prepared to leave Kepler-7 and return to the shipping lanes, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his adventures with Princess Lyra Nightsong were just beginning. After all, she'd said their paths might cross again. And knowing Lyra, when they did, it would definitely be interesting.